You're listening to Unmuted with Papamutes.
Welcome to Papamutes, everybody. Today, my guest is Sean O'Brien. Sean is the co-producer of the film Beyond Bars. Sean is also an advocate for social justice, which ties in with the film. And he's coming to us all the way from Los Angeles. I'm thrilled to have him on. Sean, welcome to Papamutes.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's get to the important stuff. How's the weather in Los Angeles?
Today, it's beautiful. I live close to the beach, so it's sometimes gray and gloomy, not like you would think of typical Los Angeles weather. But
you've been having a lot of rain. I mean, I'm in Philly, we get they tell us about stuff, and it's raining, and it's snowing, in the mountains. It's like crazy.
Yeah, we have been having a lot of rain. We get most of our rain is in like one part of the year. But I would say we probably have like gorgeous weather 90% of the time. So it's hard to really complain about the weather here. But people do it all the time. People love complaining about the weather in LA.
Of course. Of course.
Yeah.
So before we get to the movie Beyond Bars, your background, correct me if I'm wrong, you're from New Orleans and you moved eventually to Boston for college and then to LA. I know I'm condensing it, but just how did you get involved with film in New Orleans?
Yeah, I actually, my background is in acting. I studied theater at Boston University. While I was there, we did a lot of film related things in addition to theater. And I think that's when I started to get my interest in production. I took a few film classes there. So when I graduated from BU, I moved back to New Orleans. And this was at the time when they had a very prominent film industry that was just kind of starting to take off. And I worked for a few like TV shows and films kind of behind the scenes at that time. And that's really where I started to get my interest.
All right. Are you a Patriots fan?
Patriots fan? No, I am a New Orleans Saints fan, and that's about as far as it goes.
We'll back it up and say the Saints then. Yeah, I just didn't know. People move to Boston, all of a sudden they get on that wagon.
Big deal. Whenever I was there, people would get very upset that I didn't care for the Patriots.
Of course.
I am actually an Eagles fan, though. I have turned into a bit of an Eagles fan.
And how is that?
That would be my boyfriend, John Pickhaver.
We're going to get to him later. We're going to get to John later. I mean, the most amazing athlete in Delaware County, history. So how did you become the producer of this film?
So when I moved to LA, it was originally kind of for acting purposes. I knew I was interested in all aspects of film, but I really came here with the intention of working in acting. I did some kind of small stuff and just was here for a while. And acting, you do a lot of kind of odd jobs to kind of bide your time and pay the bills. And so I was just kind of doing a lot of different random things. And eventually I was like, okay, I really want to kind of focus on film more specifically. And I saw an opening for a job for an administrative assistant position at Brave New Films. And I looked into the company and I was like, this is very connected to the things that I care a lot about. And I applied for the job and I got hired as the admin assistant. And pretty quickly I was given tasks for film related things. And one thing led to another. I think I like to say I was in the right place at the right time with the right skill set. And
nothing wrong with that, right?
Yeah. And it just kind of, I became the production coordinator. And then I eventually became an associate producer. And by the time the film was over, I was a co-producer on it. Had a lot to do also with timing. So the film, it took several years to complete. And
I was going to ask that. How long, did it take?
Yeah, I was on it. I think I worked on it for about 2 years. And it was, I think, a year and a half in the making before that. So I think in total about 3.5 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So you, in the natural ebb and flow of working on a production, people come and go, and a lot of the producers had finished their time on the film, and that is kind of when I was still working for the company, and I kind of filled the slot that was needed at the time, and the rest was history.
Nice. Now, I thought of this as you were talking. Brave New Films is what are they about in a nutshell before we get to the actual movie?
They are, or I should say we are, because I'm a big part of the company now.
Sure.
It's a social justice nonprofit production company. So we're 501(c)(3), and I think basically in a nutshell, we just advocate for the big social justice issues of our
Hmm.
time. And we use media as a way to do that. And so Robert Greenwald is the president of the company, and he's been making these films under Brave New Films for about 2 decades now.
It's a great
Uh,
website. I mean, I've gone there and checked it out, and a lot of stuff on there.
yeah, he's
Pretty
been
cool.
doing it for a very, very long time. So it's that's essentially we and Beyond Bars was. I think every year we just kind of take on new issues, and Beyond Bars is at the time it was all about criminal justice reforms.
Got it.
And
So, well, there you go. What is it? I mean, you kind of said it what it's about, but in general, Beyond Bars is about what?
yes, Beyond Bars is most basically about racialized mass incarceration told through the lens of Chesa Boudin and his family, and his rise to becoming district attorney of San Francisco. And it tells the history of the Weather Underground a little bit. It goes into the history of the Weather Underground, and it talks about the larger issues of mass incarceration, and it starts to get into electing progressive district attorneys
I mean,
and
I watched
the
it.
bigger movement for that.
Right. I mean, I saw it about a month ago, and I refreshed my memory recently because I went away, not to prison, but home vacation, and
Right.
it's a great documentary. I mean, I would categorize it as that, right?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Well, what is the story? I don't want to tell it. You know, what is the story of how this abandoned child basically became the DA? It's a great story, but if you can condense it, um, you know,
Yeah. It's a tough one to explain in a quick, in a condensed kind of way. But
mhm,
so basically, his parents, Chesa Boudin's parents, Kathy Boudin and David Gilbert, they were members of the Weather Underground. And the Weather Underground was a far left radical organization formed in 1969. It was in response to their outrage at the Vietnam War and the ongoing racial injustices in the United States. Um, and they were trying to raise money for their operations, and their operations often included bombing government buildings in protest. And no one was ever hurt in the bombings, which I think is very important to note because it was very much like radical protests. But when the robbery happened in 1981 of a Brinks truck, I can get more into all of that, but Chesa was left at a babysitter, and uh, two of the other members of the Weather Underground, who are also featured in the film, Bill Ayers and Bernadine Dorn, they took him in and essentially adopted him as their own child. And he grew up visiting them in prison. And I think when he was in prison, he really saw the racial injustices and how much like families were kept apart from each other. And it kind of became, as he got older, he started to do more and more like advocacy work and public speakings about what was happening in the prison systems in the US and why it needed to change. And that led Chesa to becoming a public defender. And then ultimately, he decided to run for district attorney in San Francisco. And that's kind of where the film picks up, is that it goes through his journey of becoming district attorney. And then
Yeah, I mean,
afterwards.
it's well put together. I mean, obviously, you want the film to grab your interest, and I don't know who the editors were, but it's good. It's great. I mean, I watch a lot of films, whether it's documentaries or Hollywood or whatever, and it's the way they put it together and told the story. It keeps your interest. You know, it's like I don't know, how do I feel about this? You know, back and forth. I'm like, but I'm like, but I didn't catch. So a couple of armored truck people died, correct? Is that what happened?
Yes.
But they didn't
Yeah.
say, or maybe I missed, who actually killed them. You know what I mean?
So the robbery in 1981, it was a Brinks truck, and I guess not everybody knows what the Brinks trucks are. Those are essentially the trucks with cash from like retail establishments, essentially, and the
It's a
the
truck that
people
brings my paycheck every week.
exactly, uh, and so it was members of the Black Liberation Army were the ones who committed the robbery itself, and then members of the Weather Underground were they were the getaway drivers. So that was Kathy Boudin and David Gilbert. They were getaway drivers for what had happened, and it was actually members of the Black Liberation Army who killed the two officers and the guard. It was one of the guards of the Brinks truck who died as well. And according to everything that David and Kathy had said, is like that was never part of the plan. Nobody was supposed to get hurt. She didn't even. I think Kathy was very naive, and she would be the one who would say that. You know, she lived in kind of like a bit of a false reality of what she always told it as like a Robin Hood story to her son. And ultimately it was not them that did the murders, but it was members of the Black Liberation Army.
Guilty by association, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah, being it on it. So the story, I mean, again, it's a great story because the kid was left pretty much that day, like that morning, and that was it until this other couple came along. But do you feel the story is trying to, and again, as I'm watching it, trying to garner up sympathy for them when really they were doing crimes? You know what I mean?
Yes, totally. I don't think that, and I think that we had a lot of, I know we had a lot of discussions about this. It's a tough question, but I don't think we tried to make the audience sympathetic about the crimes. I think, and more importantly, we were trying to show the issues with our current justice system and the shortcomings of it. And I think that we use Chesa's family's story to kind of showcase that, because ultimately they really did a lot of things. Both David and Kathy, they did a tremendous amount of really great things within prison, like for HIV and AIDS, and bringing families together, and helping people get jobs in prison. And really, it was all about restorative justice for them. They really wanted to rehabilitate within prison. And I think that that's an important thing that prison can and should be, is a system for people to rehabilitate. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes there are cases where people can really like turn their lives around and ultimately be released from prison, become very productive members of society. And I think that that is way more important than trying to cast a sympathetic light on what they had actually done.
Let's see. Okay. Fair enough. So towards the end of the film, I believe towards the end, there's some pull for, are they first of all, are they still alive? These people, these four
Kathy
people.
Boudin died recently,
Okay.
actually during the making of the film.
Ah.
So
Oh,
we actually didn't finish some important interviews because she passed away. David
I see.
Gilbert is still alive. Yeah.
What about the Bill Ayers and Bernadette?
Yeah, Bill and
Bernadine.
Bernie
Sorry.
are both alive as well.
Okay. All right. So towards the end, or maybe more, in the middle, what have you. Um, the question, I believe they were up for parole, right?
Yes.
And I didn't see any. And again, I'm not a film critic, but I'm just thinking from watching other, documentaries and such. Any uh, opinion from the victims' families, whether they should be paroled or not? Was there any? Did I miss that? Or
We didn't get into it in the film very much at all.
okay, okay,
And for good reason. There's still a lot of like animosity, I'm sure.
sure,
And it's also worth noting that whenever I started working for the film, a lot of these bigger decisions on the structure and stuff had already happened.
okay,
Um, but I think one really great story that didn't make it in the film, but Chesa talked about at the panel in Los Angeles, is that uh, one of the victims, somebody who was involved in the carjacking, and I'm not going to tell the story perfectly, but one of the victims who was there, they had stolen a car, and she was part of the carjacking, and she was part of who put David Gilbert in prison. Her testimony was a huge part of why he ended up being in prison.
okay.
She actually started volunteering at the prison where Kathy Boudin was, where
Wow.
she never made it known who she was, and they forged a really great relationship and
Okay.
became friends, and a lot of like very Chesa talked about it in a way that this was an example of like what restorative justice can look like, that she got more out of that like time with Kathy volunteering in the prison and learning about everything, who she was and what had happened, and more about the details of everything than their time just spent decades and decades and decades in prison.
I see. Okay. And he was not paroled, or was he? David.
um he it's a bit, this also happened during the making of the film. So there was a lot of wild turns
Ebb
and
and
twists and
flow, right?
turns throughout this, but David Gilbert was ultimately, I believe it was he was ultimately paroled, but or his sentence was commuted by the governor of New York at the time, who was leaving office. It was on his last day. He did a series of pardons, Governor Cuomo, and
Okay.
David Gilbert was one of them. As opposed to Kathy, she got out through the parole board. She had 3 different parole hearings, and it was on her 3rd parole where she was released.
How much time did they do, approximately?
Um, David was over 40 years in prison, and Kathy was over 20 years.
So this is more of a mass incarceration. When I hear that mass incarceration, I'm thinking, maybe I'm not thinking. Is it more about put the right people? I mean, there are bad people in the world. I mean, there were
Of
no
course.
angels, but I'm just saying, put people in jail that are real bad criminals, but not the guy smoking weed on the corner. Is that where
That's a
it comes
big
into
part of it.
play?
Yes, absolutely. That's a huge part of it. It's and there are district attorneys and politicians who say this a lot better than me, and who try to make this their life's work. But I think it's the idea that there's just far too many. We incarcerate more people in the United States than anywhere else in the world by far, and it has a lot to do with private prisons and prison for profit, and that there are people who just there are a lot of people who don't. I mean, there. I really believe with what you just said. There are criminals who have done really horrific things who belong in prison. But
Okay.
I think when people are talking about putting an end to mass incarceration, it's more about what you said, having people not be in prison for crimes like smoking weed on the side of the street, where sometimes you hear about cases where people spend decades in prison for something like that.
Ooh,
Uh,
ouch. Now, is it mostly the black community that's imprisoned,
yeah,
or if
it's
the white
definitely
guy on the corner is smoking? I mean,
it's for sure more targeted towards people of color. Black and brown people are way like the incarceration rates are a lot higher. It's disproportionate to our population by far. And that is what the film really kind of gets into, is that there's a lot of injustices, and there's a lot of cases where if they were reviewed, and this is what has started to happen in a lot of cities where you have more progressive district attorneys. They review cases for people who have spent decades in prison and look at new information, and a lot of these people end up being released on parole.
do you think that's more the politicians or the police? You know what I mean? Like the police make the arrest, the politicians put them away. I mean, where is it? Because you hear a lot of, I saw some signs in the film about defund the police and stuff like that. So I'm trying to, is it more,
I
is
think
it the
that
bad
goes.
police or the bad, not bad, but, DA?
Yeah, I think that it's a very large network of misdeeds, and I think, like, we can get into this later, but the work, the volunteer work that I do in the community that I live in,
Hmm.
it's definitely geared towards the issue is happening on a local level of police enforcement and local politicians not doing anything about it. So it is a little bit of a convoluted kind of. It's happening in several different areas. It's happening at you know where I live. It's people getting stopped who just driving down the road because they look like they shouldn't, that they shouldn't be here, is what would be said by some
Hmm.
of, especially in times in the past decades. But it's gotten a little bit better, but not 100% better. And so I think that that's a huge problem, is police and a lack of training in certain circumstances. um, but then it's also happening on a political, it's turned into a political thing where I don't think it necessarily should be, where you know tough on crime is something that people kind of, they try to have that be their rallying cry, and I think that that ends up having often like a negative result.
Right, right. Understood, understood. I was going to say, how is it in your area currently? And you kind of answered that, and you're doing some volunteer stuff. What's that about?
Yeah, I live in El Segundo, California, which is a suburb of Los Angeles, and El Segundo is historically what is called a sundown town, or it used to be, and that meant that after sundown, people of color were not allowed in the city.
Really?
And so I think
Wow.
that, though that kind of racist history, decades later, still is kind of rooted in the fabric of the town or the city. I think that, and there are a lot of people, and like the organization, one of them that I volunteer for is as Sweat Equity Alliance, and they're doing really good work to try to make it a more welcoming and inclusive place. And
Is that the same as Black Equity Alliance, or is that a different?
so Black and Mayberry was the other organization.
Right,
And they have similar missions, but Black and Mayberry is more about combating racism through the arts. And it start so the Andy Griffith show
right.
used to be based in Mayberry, and
Mayberry. Sure, of course, you're right.
yeah, and Mayberry was kind of like this Pleasantville, this very
Whiter
like
than the
everything
Hallmark
is
Channel,
perfect.
right?
Yeah, exactly. And people like to say that El Segundo is Mayberry by the sea.
Got it. Okay.
But the thing that is very problematic about that is that in Mayberry, in all, I think it was 8 seasons that existed, that there was only one person of color who had a speaking role the entire show. And I think that translates to where I currently live, is that a lot of people feel like that they haven't had a voice. And the point of the mission of Black and Mayberry is to give people a voice who otherwise felt like they didn't have one.
Okay. All right. Cool. Now, where can people see the film? I mean, is it out there? I saw it because you gave me some inside
Yes, it's
connection there. But what? Where can people see? When can they see it? What's going on?
it's a great question. So in your area specifically, on May 1st of this year, there's going to be a premiere in Philadelphia at Villanova.
Sweet.
That's at 7:30 p.m. and that
Right,
will be a benefit for the Philly Justice Project.
right around the
And
corner. I like it.
yeah, so that will happen.
Will you be there? Will you be there?
Unknown. I'm gonna try to. It's a very busy time for me, so I'm gonna
Got
try.
it.
It's a 5-hour flight and whatnot, but I
Oh
would
yeah.
like to because I obviously have a lot of friends in the area,
Mhm.
and all of John's family.
Right. Of course.
So I'm gonna try to make it. There's gonna be a few other. The premiere phase has basically come to an end. I think that Philly's going to be one of the last ones, and then New York City, they're trying to make one happen as well.
So when you say
So
Philly, you mean Villanova or another one in the
yeah,
city?
it is the Philly premiere, and it is happening at
At
Villanova.
Villanova. Okay. Got it.
Yeah. So yes, I know that for those in Villanova and Philly, those are very not the same thing. But yes, to the greater United States, we're just talking about the bigger cities to give a frame of reference.
Of course.
So that's those are the bigger premieres. But now we've moved on to the second phase, which is like community screenings that are going to happen across the United States. We're already at over 200 screening signups, and that's going to be at
Sweet.
universities and like community organizations like the one that I volunteer for. I think we might do one here in El Segundo, some smaller film festivals, that kind of thing. And so anybody can sign up for to host a screening. And so that's like kind of the grassroots method of distribution that Brave New Films has done forever and ever. Brave New Films was actually one of the first, if not the first, company to put a full film on YouTube for free.
Really?
And yeah, and that was so forever and ever ago. Robert Greenwald, the president of the company, decided that like that was going to be
Miss my mouth
his
there.
his way forward, is that everything was going to be available for free to anybody who wanted. And so there was some talks with this film being available on all the streaming platforms like Amazon and Google and iTunes and everything, and that still might happen. I'm not sure where conversations left off with that, but as of right now, we're moving on to the screenings phase, where it's just going to be kind of throughout the country. Anybody can host one, and then after that, if it's not going to be on like something that you could rent on iTunes or whatever, it's going to go probably to YouTube, where anybody can watch it for free.
Okay. Yeah. I highly recommend it. How far is El Segundo from LA, just to give a
So
reference
we are
point?
right by the beach, right by LAX. So it's very we like LA is
From Hollywood or LA? Yeah. I mean,
2 minutes from where I live. You could get to LA, but that's the confusing thing about Los Angeles, is that you could be driving through and have no idea whether or not you're in LA, because it is a series of small communities that make up the larger city, and some of them are annexed as their actual own city. Like El Segundo is its own city, and then a lot of them are not. Like Venice, for instance, is part of Los Angeles. Santa Monica is not. And so we're all part of Los Angeles County, and LA County is like, when people think of LA, they're talking about the much larger, greater region.
I have been there. Fortunately, I was not driving, so
Yeah,
I get
yeah. Driving
I
is
get the idea. That was great. Now, speaking of Hollywood, did you watch the Academy Awards last night?
I did watch the Academy Awards last night.
I think Al Pacino. What the hell was going on there?
I was a little confused. I was saying how this
Did
was
he
definitely
screw
like
up?
one of my favorite Oscars I remember in a long time. They were doing a great job, and I'm just like, wait, what? Is this one of these instances where he like got it messed up again? Like he read it and it was very unclear, and I feel bad.
I know. I
Uh,
love Al. It's like one of my favorite actors of all time, but he just, I don't know what was going on there.
it's
He just,
interesting. He's the exact age, or maybe a year, give or take, from Robert De Niro, which
mhm,
I think is very interesting because I just was listening to Robert De Niro talk in the what was it, Bill Maher show, or
mhm,
it was on, yeah, he was interviewed on Bill Maher, and
mhm.
uh, De Niro sounded so sharp and so like, and he's 81, and you would never be able to tell.
Still popping out kids too.
Yeah, yeah, they both are actually, as I recall. But then whenever Pacino got up to talk, I was like, oh man, this isn't good.
Yeah,
um,
it was a weird. Well, at least he didn't get slapped, you know.
yeah, exactly. There's always room for great surprises like that.
So let's move off the serious topic, and I have a segment called "This or That."
Okay,
Basically, it's a preference thing. I'm going to give you two choices. This is just to get to know you outside of the of what you do. You just tell me your preference.
okay.
Very simple. Um, doesn't mean you hate the other one. Just it's a preference thing. All right, here we go. This or that, beer or whiskey,
Beer,
pizza or pasta.
pizza.
Ooh, ouch. Oh, Brian. Okay. Pacino would not like that. Um, snowstorm or rainstorm.
mm, Rainstorm.
Sounds good. Driver or passenger.
Passenger.
So, trip into outer space, and I don't mean like that 5 minute thing that people do now, rich people. I'm talking about trip into space for a few days or weeks or whatever.
Like I'm gonna
Or,
go stay at the International Space Station for a few.
exactly, trip into outer space or a trip to the bottom of the sea, but not in one of those blow up dirigible things, but
Outer
something
space.
legit.
That's
Going
a
into space,
no-brainer
huh?
for me. Yeah. I
uh,
have more faith in the ships going outer space than the submarines going into the
yeah,
ocean.
that was not good.
Or I wouldn't even want to be on a boat in the middle of the ocean for that long. I'm
I
not
mean,
a big.
I like the idea of seeing what's down there. I don't know if I want to be cooped up in. I mean, I guess you're in a spaceship; it doesn't matter. But
I
in
think
that,
I would like
the
to wear
sub,
some of those Apple goggles and just like look around and VR, see what the
there you
bottom of
go.
the ocean is like.
There's a workaround. All right.
Yeah.
Cat or dog?
That's a tricky question.
With the
I'm
cat
definitely
sitting
a
right
dog.
behind you, don't
Yeah,
disrespect
yeah.
the cat.
But, it's dog.
Oh,
Even though I
wait.
have two cats. I think
What?
he's still there.
All right. Swimming pool or beach?
Beach.
Cool. I mean, how is the beach there by you? I mean, some beaches are really
It's,
nice with a place to hang out and sit, and some are just like up against the rocks. You don't want to go near it.
yeah, where I live, it's gorgeous. I love the beach. I'm like a 5 minute walk down to the ocean, and you can see the mountains in the background. But the beach is very, very large, wide beach, and not that many people there. Which for me, that's the whole
Perfect.
experience. I can't stand going down to like the Santa Monica Pier, where it's just like every single person who's ever heard of LA is like there.
Santa
I prefer
Monica.
to go. Yeah.
Pancakes or waffles?
Pancakes. It's a
Yeah.
great question.
Kind of the same thing, different shape though, right? I don't know.
Yeah. So one would argue, but
Texting or phone calls?
phone calls.
Oh, cool.
I'm,
Steak or lobster? Steak
lobster.
or lobster? Lobster.
Lobster.
Got to go lobster. All right, last one. Tom Brady highlight film or John Pickaver highlight film?
John Pickhaver highlight film.
Wow, going with you picked pick.
Yes,
I
indeed.
have it here somewhere in my archives, so don't worry. It will make an appearance. I gotta find it. He set the record for the longest run in grade school history. Caught the ball and he ran. He set the record for the. Do you know that?
No, I didn't know that piece of it. That's
Let me
awesome.
explain.
He has talked about it several times, so it was like definitely a crowning achievement for him.
But let me clarify. Let me clarify. It wasn't about the yardage. It was about how long it took him. And so,
was he just like running in circles?
no, he was running straight. He was running straight, but the speed was, a little lacking. But anyway, just to backtrack, did you see any of the movies that were nominated?
Yeah, so I'm still part of the Screen Actors Guild, so I get a lot of pretty much all the screeners.
Oh, cool.
And it's a lot of the same film. It's pretty much all the same films that are nominated. So every year we make an effort to watch as many of the films as possible. I think this is actually the first year in a long time where we didn't see all of them.
There was 10 of them. Yeah.
Yeah. But I do want to go back, and there's a lot that I really want to see.
Yeah.
A little disappointed. I really, there were some movies that I thought got all of the attention, and that other movies I was hoping for
I've seen Holdovers and Barbie. Yes, I went to Barbie. I thought it was great, but what's the other? What's the one that won? The
Oppenheimer.
Oppenheimer and Pretty Things. I guess I want to check out.
Yeah, I guess I got to go and watch Pretty Things now. I'm blanking on the name right now. The 3-hour film.
Oh, Flowers of the or
Killers of the Flower Moon.
Yeah,
I actually
great,
think that's an exceptional film.
Great book, but I haven't heard good reviews on the film.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I really liked it.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Because what I heard was it was slow, dragged out. Each scene dragged out. I don't know.
It could have been at least a half hour shorter.
Okay.
But my actual impression of it was that while watching it, I did not feel like it took forever, which is an interesting take, because I know, some people really felt like it was just way too long.
I don't mind a 3-hour movie if it's keeping my interest. That's
right.
Like Green Mile, stuff like that. That was
right.
It kept my interest. That was great. Anyway, I'll check some of these out. What's coming up in 2024 besides the premiere stuff?
Yeah, we are doing right now. I just we're have finished and are into the final stages of clearance for a 35-minute documentary on voter suppression. That is one thing, and then the next piece we have already started is on reproductive freedom, about a woman's right to choose. That will be a much shorter piece. And then we're going to do a lot of short pieces for social media, essentially. And they're all going to be geared towards getting people to go vote in the next election. I think specifically we're going to be focusing on youth voter engagement and trying to get young people to go vote.
Where can now a Brave New Film, they have a website, right?
Yes.
What is the website exactly?
It is bravenewfilms, plural.org.
.org. Okay. Yeah. All right, cool. Yeah, I have gone there. I should know that. But yeah, it's great. There's a lot of stuff on there. A lot of stuff.
Instagram, I think, is where it's got a very active Instagram. I kind of think of the Instagram as a little bit separate from the rest of the stuff, though, because it's mostly run by one person, and it's got their own kind of point of view and perspective on things. And then bravenewfilms.org focuses more on you can see all the shorts and the film. Pretty much every documentary we've ever made, feature length and shorter films, are on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. If you just search Brave New Films, everything is there.
Cool. Sounds great. Sean, it's been great having you on. I really appreciate it. I look forward to the premiere and when it's available for everyone. Thanks again.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
All right. Have a good one.